In this lecture, I want to look at a topic that I've mentioned in passing along the way in a number of the other lectures, and that's voting by grading. And the idea is that in many of our group decision-making situations, we're quite accustomed to the idea that what the voters are doing is actually assigning grades to each of the different candidates or alternatives. So for example, in figure skating or diving or gymnastics competitions, those are examples where you have a set of experts and the experts are somehow judging each of the different contestants or each of the different competitors. Same thing for piano recitals, classifying wines at wine competitions. Those of us who are academics are very used to ranking students based on the grades that they actually receive. All of us have looked at the Michelin star and made a decision about which restaurant we might want to go to, ignoring, of course, prices. Based on how many Michelin stars are assigned to it, which restaurant we should stay in based on recommendations of various people. So we're used to this idea that when we're making a decision, the idea is that you have a set of experts. The voters are thought of as experts, and those experts are judging the different candidates or alternatives. So the question we have is, can we take this general idea and apply it to other decision-making situations? For example, in a presidential election, could we use a method similar to one of these? Well, in order to do that, we have a couple questions. The first question we have is, what is the common grading language? Is there a common grading language? In the examples I listed on the previous slide, the grading languages were set by convention or set for various reasons. And the experts or the judges spend some time. The reason we consider them experts is because they know how to apply the grades to the various particular examples of wines, for example, or particular performance. So the question you need to ask is, does there exist a common grading language? So a set of terms, of numbers that you can use to assign grades to each of the different candidates. The second question is, once you assign the grades to the candidates, how do we aggregate those different grades? How do we combine all of those different grades? Does it make sense to actually, if we think of the grades as numbers, to actually add up the numbers and maybe, take the average? So how do we aggregate the grades is the second question. The third question is, should you allow a no opinion option? Or does the lowest grade translate to no opinion? There's, of course, a difference between not having an opinion about any of the candidates and actually assigning the lowest possible grade, which you might interpret as disapproving of all of the candidates. And this is absolutely crucial if your grades are numbers and the way you're calculating the grades is by averaging, because adding in a 0 to an average will of course bring the grade down, but not simply ignoring a vote will not bring the average down at all. So it's important to distinguish between the lowest grade, which might be a 0, and not actually have an opinion about that particular candidate. So some examples of voting systems that we've already discussed that fall into this general category, voting by grading. The first example is, of course, approval voting. So approval voting, each voter has one grade, and that grade they can either give to a candidate or assign to a candidate or not, namely approval. I've mentioned dis and approval voting, so you allow voters two grades. You can either approve of a candidate or disapprove of a candidate, or really neither. So it's really kind of 3 grades. And then the 2 methods that we're going to talk about in this lecture, majority judgment and score voting. So majority judgment was invented by Belinsky and Laricki, or at least popularized and extensively discussed by Belinsky and Laricki. Score voting or range voting has been extensively discussed by Warren D. Smith. And I'll give you references at the end. Okay, so how does score voting work? The idea is that you fix a common grading language. For concreteness, let's suppose that it's the first 11 integers, so 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10. It doesn't have to be that. It could be 0 through 100. It could be 1 through 100. It could be 10 through 20, 10 through 100. Whatever you want, whatever makes sense for your decision problem. But let's fix a set of numbers. It really needs to be numbers because the candidate with the largest average grade is declared the winner. So just to remind you, the average, so if these are candidate A's grades, the average is going to be, you add up all of the grades. So it's 7 plus 7, 8 plus 8 plus 8. There's only 2 8s. 8 plus 8, 9 plus 9 plus 9. And then you add in 10. And you divide by the total number. In this case, it's 8. That number is the average, so 8.375. You do the same thing for B's grades. The average is 10.625. Since B has the higher average, B is going to be ranked higher than A by score voting or range voting. If you're interested in this method, I recommend this website, which talks about a number of general properties of this method. I also recommend rangevoting.org. This is an excellent website with lots of resources for anybody interested in voting theory. So I recommend taking a look at that website. But let's move on to majority judgment. It's a similar method, just a different way of aggregating the votes. So majority judgment, you fix the set of grades. For concreteness, let's just assume it's 0 through 10. And then the candidate with the largest median grade is actually declared the winner. So the median grade, of course, is the grade that falls in the middle if you order the grades from lowest to largest. So for example, suppose A's grades are all of these. To calculate the median, you drop the lowest and highest, and you keep doing that till you end up with whatever grade's in the middle. In this case, it's the grade 7. If there's an even number of voters, you won't have just one grade in the middle. You'll end up with a range of grades in the middle. In this case, it's 6 to 9. And you have different choices here. You could actually average 6 and 9, but that in general may not be a grade in your grading system. So what we're going to do in majority judgment is we're just going to take the lowest one in that interval, and that's going to be your median grade. So the median grade here for B is 6. Then the candidate with the highest median grade will be ranked higher. So in this case, A will be ranked above B, because A has a higher median grade. It's a bit unfair because we have a different number of voters in these two cases, but you get the point. Now, one thing I want to mention, it's a bit of a digression, but in the majority judgment system, one of the interesting aspects of that system is the tie-breaking rule that they propose. So the question is, what happens if you have the same median grade? Well, if you have the same median grade, you might say, well, they're just tied. But intuitively, you might want to do something else to break the tie. So for example, if these are A's grades and these are B's grades, we see that 9 is the median grade, so they're both tied. But intuitively, we see that overall, A really seems to get higher grades. So we would want to somehow figure out how to break the tie and perhaps elect candidate A. So here's the tie-breaking mechanism. You find the median grade. If it's tied, you drop that grade. So you drop 9 from consideration, and then you do the process again. You find the new median grade. Well, we do that. We see that again, it's tied. So again, you drop that median grade, and you do it again, and you keep doing it. And if you keep doing it and they remain tied the whole time, that obviously means that they are assigned exactly the same grades. And of course, in that case, the candidate should be tied. In this case, we see that A is assigned the median grade 11, B is assigned the median grade 10, so A will end up being declared the winner. So that's the tie-breaking mechanism for majority judgment. It doesn't have to be this way. You might think that this tie-breaking mechanism has certain undesirable properties. There are other tie-breaking mechanisms that one could propose. You could look on rangevoting.org for some examples, but this is the one that's proposed for the majority judgment voting system. Now, let's look at an example. Suppose there's 5 voters, 1 through 5, and there's 3 candidates, 1, 2, and 3. And let's just use the grades A, B, C, D, and F. So for all Americans, anybody who's gone through the American school system, these grades are going to be very familiar to you. A is the highest grade, B is the second highest, C, then D, and F is the lowest grade. And let's suppose that our 5 voters grade the candidates as follows. 1 gives a grade of A to candidate 1, B to candidate 2, and D to candidate 3, and so on. So in order to calculate who the winner is, we have to find the median grade for each of the candidates. So the median grade for candidate 1 is going to be C. For candidate 2, it's going to be B. And for candidate 3, it's going to be C. So 1 and 3 are tied. We would need to employ the tie-breaking mechanism to determine which of 1 and 3 comes in second. But for what I just want to focus on is the fact that candidate 2 is elected. Candidate 2 is declared the winner under majority judgment. Now, does that result make sense? Is that the result we want? Well, here's one thing I want you to notice, one thing to point out. Note that if you ask all of the voters, which of candidate 1 or 2 would you rank first? Who would you rank above each other? 1 above 2 or 2 above 1? 4 out of the 5 voters would rank 1 above 2. So if you just look at the grades they assign, we see that 4 out of the 5 voters give a higher grade to 1 over 2. So they all rank 1 over 2. It's only 1 voter that ranks 2 above 1. So people might be very surprised at this result. They might say, why is candidate 2 declared the winner? 4 out of 5 of us are almost unanimous that everybody prefers 1 over 2. So you might take this as an argument against majority judgment, or at least, I shouldn't say against the whole voting by grading methodology, but rather against the use of a median to calculate the winner. But you also this doesn't have to be an argument against the median, because you could say, well, no, actually, median is exactly what you want. It's responding correctly to the voters' overall opinions about all of the candidates. Note that candidate 2 has a lot of B grades, and any student will tell you a B is not a bad grade. So you get a lot of B grades. It's true that you get 2 very low grades, 2 F grades, but the other candidates have by and large lower grades than 2. So rather than viewing the fact that 4 out of 5 people end up ranking candidate 1 over candidate 2 as some argument against using the median, you could say, well, no, actually, the median is responding exactly the way you want if we ask the voters to grade all of the candidates. So just to conclude, I want to mention what score voting would do, or range voting would do. In order to do that, we have to assign numbers to the grade. So let's say A is 4, B is 3, C is 2, D is 1, and F is 0. If we do that and we calculate the averages, we see that candidate 1 is declared the winner. And that, of course, matches our intuition that a large majority of the voters rank 1 above 2, so somehow 1 really should be declared the winner, or at least 2 should not be declared the winner. And intuitively, you can see that if you calculate the winner in terms of who has the highest average, if lots and lots of people rank a particular candidate over another candidate, then that first candidate is certainly going to have a higher average. So according to score voting, the winner is going to be candidate 1. According to majority judgment, the winner is going to be candidate 2. So this is certainly not all there is to say about range voting and score voting. There's a lot more. There's a lot bigger discussion you can have about the relative merits or problems with these different voting methods. I recommend taking a look at this book by Belinsky and Laricki, Majority Judgment, on this method. And also, I've already mentioned this website by Warren D. Smith. Both are places where you can learn more about these two very interesting voting methods.